The fact that we're considering to bring somebody on with no scientific or medical credentials, who's falsely claimed for decades that vaccines cause autism, who has, quite frankly, said just outrageous comments about science and medicine, that this person would come in to gut the NIH, I think is shameful. I think is shameful. And Ms. Greene, you can clap all you want. I'm very concerned that someone that wants to gut the NIH, HHS, and other services could be put in charge of health of any kind.
Congress is back in session for the first time since Donald Trump and the Republicans secured the destruction of our country for at least the next 2 years. And Marjorie Taylor Greene is still making a complete fool of herself.
It is shameful, it's dangerous, and if this committee is about pandemic prevention, we should be very concerned as a country that RFK Jr. could be put in charge of health when he is a vaccine denier and has caused great harm to the American public.
Dubbing RFK Jr. as simply a vaccine denier is putting it very lightly, considering this is what he seriously believes.
COVID-19, there's an argument that it is ethnically targeted. COVID-19 attacks certain races disproportionately. COVID-19 is targeted to attack Caucasians and black people. The people who are most immune are Ashkenazi Jews and Chinese. But we don't know whether it was deliberately targeted that or not. But there are papers out there that show the racial and ethnic differential impact to that.
It's hard to find the words to describe just how devastating Trump's nomination of RFK Jr. as Secretary of Health and Human Services will be on the average American who already has to fight for basic healthcare needs. But MAGA stooges like Marjorie Taylor Greene will celebrate his nomination as a crucial victory against the evil forces of scientific research and modern medicine.
This committee hearing today is titled Preparing for the Next Pandemic, Lessons Learned in the Path Forward. I think one of the greatest lessons that has been learned here is the government and its powerful agencies should never use the American people's hard-earned tax dollars to create viruses that can be unleashed on the world like COVID-19 was. This led to killing millions of people all over the world. COVID-19 was funded using the gain of function in a biolab in China, and then it was lied about. Dr. Fauci lied to the American people, abusing his power and position and role, very powerful role, paid for by the American tax people. He lied, and many, many people died.
You're all smart enough to know that this is purely conspiratorial garbage being weaponized to sow distrust in the medical community to justify gutting vital government agencies. MTG could not care less about the millions of people who died and are still dying from COVID, because all of this testimony is just a tryout for another position within the government with more power.
Schools were shut down. People's jobs were shut down. Employment was ended. Small businesses were shut down. Life, as everyone knew it, was shut down. This caused violations of people's First Amendment rights, freedom of speech, freedom of religion. People couldn't even go to the beach. Then suicides hit record highs. And the saddest thing is there was record suicide rates seen among children and a mental health crisis released on Americans like never before. Now there's massive delays in education and loss in learning. What was absolutely repulsive is the forced masking requirements of children. Children were not at risk of being hospitalized or dying from COVID-19, yet children became one of the worst victims of the malpractice and abuse of power by your agencies and by people in charge in many cities, states, and the government. It was absolutely horrendous. But then there were doctors that came out with treatments using ivermectin, zinc, vitamin D, and it was labeled horse paste. And those doctors were attacked and criticized and called conspiracy theorists. Yet while those doctors were actually saving lives, these other patients were being forced into the hospital, put on respirators, and were actually dying. My own personal doctor never lost one single patient by prescribing ivermectin and this other protocol. As a matter of fact, he saved people's lives. Thank God he did that. The CDC even changed the definition of vaccine. The FDA approved an experimental vaccine through a rushed approval process that suppressed trials and data that showed that vaccines didn't work and had side effects that even caused death. Now vaccines have been mandated on the population in order to work, go to school, and live as functioning citizens in the United States. Yet people who reported vaccine injuries and deaths on the VAERS system were ignored, they were mocked, they were called conspiracy theorists, and they were canceled on social media when they tried to tell about the horrifying things that were happening to them or their family members. The White House even accused the unvaccinated of killing people, calling it a pandemic of the unvaccinated. And they said, we'll bring a winter of death for yourselves, families, and hospitals. But guess what? Vaccines didn't work. And those that were vaccinated, boosted, continued to catch COVID. Our own president, President Biden, even tested positive for COVID-19 after this summer's presidential debate. That is unbelievable.
It is a major indictment of our country that nearly 5 years into the pandemic, someone with as much power as MTG still has no idea what the goal of COVID vaccines was: preventing people from hospitalization and dying. No vaccine is 100% effective, okay? We all understand that. But that doesn't mesh with the narrative that the Republicans have been running with for years now.
And I can tell you, when you talk about vaccine hesitancy, as one sitting before you that never took the COVID vaccine, nor will I take it, thank God, I'm so glad I didn't take it. Yes, this vaccine hesitancy has risen to new heights. And I can tell you right now, I'll stand here and represent all the Americans that do not ever want to be forced to take another vaccine that the government is telling us to take after they created a deadly virus. I can tell you right now, I'll also represent all the Americans that never want their children to be forced to be vaccinated. Currently, right now, the CDC is recommending that children as young as 6 months have 2 doses of the Moderna COVID-19 vaccine and 3 doses of the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine. So vaccine manufacturers continue to make billions and billions of dollars on a vaccine that doesn't work, being forced on children, innocent children that don't even need it, because they aren't at risk of being hospitalized or dying from this vaccine. Not only that, vaccines need to be investigated further. The rise of autism, learning disabilities, neurological problems, and so much more that children are suffering from today absolutely is being forced upon these children and their families because of these vaccines. This committee should have investigated the vaccines, and it was a failure to not do so. This has literally been a war on the American people's health, the world's health, but also a war on our children's health. It's a war that has been waged on them by our government, Big Pharma, who's making all the money. Preparing for the next pandemic is actually recognizing that the last pandemic resulted in crimes against humanity. People that perpetuated and continue to perpetuate these crimes need to be prosecuted. And that needs to be starting in the next administration, and I'm pretty sure our next Attorney General will do that, and I look forward to seeing that happen.
Let's make one thing abundantly clear. Marjorie Taylor Greene is one of the most unserious, unintelligent individuals working in the government. When you hear that testimony, if you have common sense and you actually are a critical thinker, you're going to lose brain cells. Your head is going to hurt from the levels of ignorance and probably willful ignorance, right? But her testimony really plays directly into the nomination of RFK Jr. as Secretary of Health and Human Services, and it perfectly displays the victimhood complex that so many Republicans operate on. For example, MTG framing masking and vaccine mandates as violations of someone's freedom and their constitutional rights, instead of looking at it as protecting yourself and others around you from getting sick. What a concept. What a concept for a vaccine. And you really understand that these are two sides of the same coin, but they convey very different attitudes. And it's really rich because so many other people in a party talk about how, somebody gets pregnant, oh no, we're going to decide what you do with your body. Okay? You don't get to decide whether you have an abortion or not. If that's something that you want to do. So you can't have it both ways, bro. You can't talk about, oh yeah, it's a violation of somebody's freedom for them to be mandated to take a vaccine. But then on the other side, you're telling an individual who got pregnant what they can do with their body. No, I'm sorry. For Rebel HQ, I'm Chris Williamson. We'll see you next time.